This is a Cold War map, a correct Cold War map, because yesterday I accidentally used the wrong one. This one is showing NATO forces and the Warsaw Pact. Traditionally, we would call NATO forces first world countries, and then the Soviet aligned forces second world countries, and any unaligned forces third world countries, even though now we colloquially term the third world as basically a poor country. But a lot of countries, like Austria, was determined to be neutral. They were like, okay, we will leave Austria, unlike what they did with Germany, if it remains neutral in the conflict. Similarly, Finland had to remain neutral because of the treaties that they had signed with the Soviet Union, following the end of the Continuation War. Now, in the 50s, the amount of forces on the continent looked something like this. 20 years later, in the 70s, it had slightly changed a little bit. However, the overall temperature of the Cold War had not really cooled down that much. This shows all the nuclear weapons that the US versus the USSR had during the Cold War, all the way up to today. And as you can see, the United States had a head start at the beginning. However, the USSR just continued producing more and more and more until they got to 40,000 nuclear weapons. Thankfully, today, we've backed off a little bit and we only have 5,000 apiece, roughly. Now, a big part of the Cold War was them worrying about the Fulda Gap, which is right over here in Germany. Because as you can see, all of Eastern Europe, basically, with a couple of exceptions over here, is basically just flat plains, which is why in World War II, there was a lot of very quick movements of tanks and other armored vehicles. And so the Russians, to counter this, built just insane amounts of tanks, many of which we're seeing are being destroyed now in Ukraine. And so the Western allies were worried that they were actually just going to use those tanks to bust through and attack the West. Thankfully, that never happened. Still hasn't happened. Fingers crossed.